Hello and welcome back to another activity. So in this video we'll be looking at this activity here. So today's activity is to write a C program, right, that has the following menu options. So area of a triangle, area of a rectangle, area of a circle, and then the option 4 should be exit. The user selects the number corresponding to an option. Upon selecting an option, a menu option, the program takes the appropriate input values from the user and computes the result. After displaying the result, the system returns the user to the menu option. The program is terminated if menu option 4 is selected. Then we were given some useful formulae to use. So basically this is the task for today, and then let's see how we can go about it. Now first things first, we would first have to go to our paper and then plan for this. So this is the area app, so I'll call it area app, right? Interesting. Now we are to first display some options, right? So which means that we've gotten one variable name, so the variables needed, right? Variables needed. So options, so one variable is option, and then this would just be an integer, right? So options. Now so we have to display an option, and then this option 1 should be area of what? Triangle, and then the second option should be area of what? Rectangle, and then the third option should be area of a circle, right? And then the fourth option given us was what? Exit. So it means that should the user choose or select or type number 4, the program should exit. Interesting. So now for area of a triangle we have 1/2 base times height, right? Which means that we would need our base, so the base could also be a float, right? So float as our base, and then we have another float, so we have float as base and a float as the height of the triangle. Now for rectangle is just base times breadth, or breadth times height, or length times breadth, so length times width or whatever. So we have, this could also be a float, right? But then you could decide to make yours an integer, so it doesn't matter. So this is length, and then what? The width or the breadth. Now the area of a circle, that's pi r square, right? So you have pi, and then you have the r squared, right? So it means that we'll need one float, right, which is for the radius, and then we have to set the constant for pi, right? We have to give it our own value, so you can decide to use maybe 3.142, right? But then you can choose any value at all you want. Now, and then the option, the exit. So when we go back the program, so the first thing we have to do is first print what? This display menu, right? We first have to print this display menu, and then print these options on the screen as well, right, for the user to choose. After displaying these options on the screen, right, we then get what? An input, right? We get the option inputs, right? So we get option input from the user, right? So option input, so the user can choose maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever. And then after getting these inputs, right, we would now use this input. So we will now use what? Conditional statements. So if statements, right, to do what? To make a decision, right? So we would use if statements to make a decision on where to go in our program, right? So one way of going about this is probably writing a function or creating a function, right? Creating a function for both all the areas. So you can create a function for triangle, a of triangle, right? You can create another function area of rectangle, and another function area of circle, right? And then call those functions after the user chooses one variable, one option, or better still, put the code for calculating the area inside the option selected. Straightforward. So after getting the option, we use conditional statements, and then to ensure that the option selected gets the desired result. Okay, now after getting that desired result, the question says that what we are to, after getting the desired result, the question says that what, select a number corresponding. Upon selecting the menu, the program takes the, after displaying the result, the system what returns to the option menu, right? Which means that the program would have to return, right? And then we know that the one way of returning values or performing some tasks repetitively is by using loops. So it means that we would have to use a particular loop, and then from our video on loops, we realize that the while loop is good to be used when performing a particular task until a given condition is met, right? And while we use the for loop to perform a particular task iteratively a certain number of times, right? So in this case, we would have to continue looping through the program until the option becomes 4, right? So if the option is not number 4, we won't exit, we won't leave the program. So basically that's what this task is demanding from us. So first, let's get our program running and then see how we can make this program continuously run. So that's that. So now let's go into our terminal and then start. So we use our favorite text editor to create this program. So we'll call this area app, right? Area app .c. So .c, and then now, so we first have to declare to include our standard input output, and then we call our int main function. Here we are returning void, right? And then we're returning nothing, so we use the void, and then so our chunk of code goes here. So the first thing we have to do is first declare our variables. We realize that we would need floats, right? And then so you can choose to use integers, or let's use integers to save some memory space. Okay, so the integer, the first one is the option, right? So options or option, and then the next one is base, assuming that the base of triangles are just integers. Okay, but you could also use floats as well to perform this task. So option base, the height, right? So you could use the height, and then the width, right? So width, that's for the rectangle. Length, so we have the length, and then we have the radius that we would use for the circle. know that we are still assuming that what these lengths are going to be integers. Keep that in mind. So we have that, and then we want to set our pi. So our pi is a float, obviously, and then we'll give it just 3.142 to 3.142. Simple as that. Now that we've declared our variables that we would need, right? So let me put a comment here declaring our variables. Right, now let's come down here, and then so first we'd have to display our options on the screen for the person. So you can say, you can just do f puts, no, let's do printf, right? Printf, and then so for this printf you can decide to use, say that hello, welcome to our welcome message, welcome to our area app, right? And then going to the next line, please choose from the options below. Okay, so could come here, and we could even put all of this into one app, but one print, but let's do this. So please choose from the options below, please choose from the options below, assuming the person knows that the choosing would be by typing the number beside each option, right? From the options below, right? And then so we can give this, and then move to a new line, and then type option 1, area of what, of triangle. So triangle. Option 2 is what, so we move to the new line, to the next line. Option 2 is what, area of what, a rectangle. Option 3 to move, print a new line. Option 3 is what, area of a cycle. Move to the new line, and then the fourth option is for the user to exit the program, right? So after printing out this option menu, then we'd have to do what, so this is our welcome message, right? Welcome message. We said it's a good habit to be leaving comments. These comments would help you to remember what certain lines of codes are doing next time you come and visit your code. So this is for option menu, right? Option menu, and then the next one. So after displaying the option menu, we said that we should get the input from the user, right? So scan f, right? Now what are we getting? We are taking the options, so, and we said the options should be an integer, so we use the %d, right? And then we get the address of the what, option, right? The option variable. Interesting. So the address of the option variable, and then we do that. Now, so after taking the input from the user, here we would have to declare, so use the if statement and then say the if option, right? So first let's give a comment here, getting option, taking option from user, and then now we say that, so we use the if, the conditions, right? If what, the option, right? So our option, so if option, right, is equal to what, let's say 1, right? Then we perform this. Interesting. So then we ask the user to give us the base and then the height, right? It's a corresponding area, so we demand for the base and then the height of a triangle. So we print f of what? Please, or enter the length of the base, right? The length of the base of your triangle. I know this is quite long, but let's take it that way, of your triangle. Then move to the next line and wait for the person to input the answer, and then we scan, right? We scan f, so we wait and take the entries. So here we use percent what? We are assuming it's an integer, so we use percent d. So but if you choose to make it a float, make sure you change that to percent f, right? And then we are getting the address of what? The base. Interesting. Now we forgot to terminate this line here, so let's put it there. So now from here we now print what? Print f, right? We could decide to take two inputs at the same time, so let's do that to save some time here. So the length of the base and height, right? So let's do and height of, okay, so instead of the length, let's say the value, sorry, to prevent tautology, the value or ambiguity, so the value of the base and height of your triangle. Okay, so now that we are taking two inputs, you can just do percent d comma percent what? D, and then here we take the base, right, and then the height, assuming that what? The user would not interchange, right? But then if the user interchanges to, there's nothing happens, because it's still going to be the same in the end, since we are multiplying the two. So and then the height variable, right? Okay, so now from here we can decide to do what? Perform the calculation. So I forgot, we would have to first declare that the area, right? So we need an area here, and since we are divided by 2, the result would be a float, right? Because once you perform any division, the result becomes a float. So let's give it a float for area. So area. So now here we choose that our area should be given as what? Or should be computed as 1/2, or we could just do base, right, times height, right? So let's see, times height, so that will be star the height, right, assuming the person or the individual would input and then divided by 2. So that's 1/2 base times height, so divided by 2, right? And we print our area, so print f, right? The area is what? The area of your triangle is percent d, since it will be a float, right? And then we return what? We return the area, so area, keep that in mind. Then we end it. So now we are done with the first option, so let's first save, compile and run our code and see whether everything works as we want to. So come in. Okay, so here we do GCC, right? Then we called it area, right? So area app.c, we want the output to be area app dot what x. So we compile. Oh, there's an error. Yeah, we wrote print instead of printf. Where is that print? Where are you? Okay. Oh, sorry. So there was a print down here which we didn't need. So that'll be, let's save this and then recompile. Interesting, we don't have any error. So we do what? We now run our file, our app to C. So /area.x. Interesting. So now our option comes, but then please choose an option below. We should have moved to the next line so that we can input our option, but here let's choose one, right? So because we've done that for the area of a triangle. So once we hit run, they said enter the value of the base and height of your triangle. So my triangle has a base of 3 and then the height of what? Let's say 6. Interesting. Now the area of your triangle is interesting. So now we can see that this ideally this shouldn't be right, because 32, this is 32,963, and this is not the area we are expecting, right? So it means there's a logical error here. The program compiles alright and runs alright, but then this is not the answer we are expecting. So while creating the app, we should always make sure that we try them with values that we need, right? Values that we know of head, so we can easily detect if our code is misbehaving or not. Yeah, so this error, the error we had came from the logical error. So let's rerun the code and see. We have to input so number 1 is the option we've created for now. We want the length to the height, the base to be 2. Now if you check here, we said this comma this, so it means that we had to separate these elements with a comma. That was the error, comma 2. And then yes, now it tells us that the area of our triangle is what? 2.00. So we can still decide to shorten that to just 2 decimal places. So .2 here, then it will just round it to 2 decimal places for us. Now our area component is ready, right? So now we choose to create for the area of a rectangle. So else if, right, we said in the video containing for the conditional statements, right, that we can use the else if statement, right, to give it or to supply our program with multiple options. So if your program has multiple choice like ours have, then we can use the else if to check another option. So else if the option, right, is equal to what? Let's say 2, then we give it a code for what? Area of, we give it a code for area of a rectangle. Interesting. So here we decide to print f, right, and then say that, okay, yeah, let's use puts, right, f puts. So f puts, and then print f, and then choose what? Enter. If you want to use the, you would have to use a puts, because the f puts makes use of what? A variable, a character variable, and you would have to give this input, supply this input as a variable before you can use the f puts. But then if you want to just print it, you can use the puts, but you would get a warning. So I don't want to, I'm just avoiding the warning. So enter the values of the, so we want the length and then what? So enter the length, and let's just enter the length and breadth, and width, right? We said width, so, and width of your rectangle. This is just one way of doing it. There are several ways, but this is just one way of doing it. Rectangle. Once your program runs, you are good to go. So I want this to move to the new line, and then give us some space to type. And then we do what? We scan for the options the person will give us, right? And this time around, there are two things that we are expecting: the length, right? So we are assuming they are all integers. So %d. Just be cautious. For all you know, for examination purposes, you could decide to make it float, so that if your code or your program is tested with decimal numbers, it would return the exact values as the person expects. So here we assign them to the length, right? Hey, the spelling of length here isn't right. So length, and then here too we give it the length. We assign it to the length here, right? The length here, and then to the what? The breadth, the width. So width variable here. Interesting. So now we compute our area to be equal to what? Length times breadth. So we just do length times what? Breadth. So times width. Sorry. So you do that, and then you save. Okay. And then we print. So we print what? F. So we print F. That's your area. The area. So what you can actually do is just put this output results. You can create a character variable and then put this output result as a variable, and then use the f puts and then print that variable. That wouldn't be a bad option either. The area of your rectangle is, so we are, this is multiplication, so the answer would be an integer, but still, since we used float for area, we would have to give it a float if we don't want any error. Is that so? Then you can choose to now call the area variable here, right? And then save. So now we are done with the second option. Let's run it and see what happens to our code. So we save our code and then compile. So we compile. Interesting. The width, we've not defined the width. Did we define? Yes, we defined. Okay, we used capital letters here. Oops. Use capital letters. So you should always check that your variables they tally there, else you always run into errors. So let's clear this screen first, the terminal, and then now we recompile. Then there's also another one. Else if, okay, expected this. Oh, let's see what happens here. We didn't close the curly braces for the if statement. That was my bad. And then let's check whether the else if one is also closed as well. Okay, it's now here. Interesting. So let's see, save, and then now let's clear and then recompile. Okay, now we don't get any error. Let's run our app, and then we choose, now let's choose 2 and supply it with 2, 2. Remember, if you don't want any error, you just put a comma between them, and then we are told that it's at 4. Interesting. So the second one also works. So I want it to return 2 decimal places, so I do 0.2 here, and then we print a new line. Make the prompt go to a new line. So yes, now the option 2 also works. So we go to the option 4. So else if, right? Else if. So we now type our command. So else if option, our option is what? Is equal to, or is 3. Then we do what? We print what? Print f, enter the radius, right, of your cycle. Then we wait patiently, move to the next line, and then wait patiently for output. Let's end this line and then scan, right? Scan f for that. Then we end it as well. Now from here we enter the radius of, so we take the radius, that's percent what, d. We assume that the radius will always be an integer, so percent d, comma, then the address of the radius variable. Interesting. So now, so after that we compute our area as what? Pi. Another way is we could decide to do away with the area variable and then compute the area straightforward while printing the answer, right? So but then let's just make it understandable, readable. So area of, so we said the area is equal to pi r squared, so pi times what? R squared. So that will be the radius times the radius, right? So here you could just call the square function we created in the previous video in the function video to do this work for us. If you know how to create the function, you can just use that to do that, and then we print our output or our results. So that will be the area of your cycle, right, is percent what? F backslash n, right, and then we give it the area variable. Interesting. So basically these are just repetitive tasks. You are just doing the same thing over and over again, but I hope this sticks. You should practice more. The more you practice, the more it sticks. So practice makes permanent. So here, so now we go to 3, then we provide our radius to be 2, and then the area of our circle is 12 points. That's interesting. So that'll be 4 times 3 point. Okay, that's nice. So this works. All right, so we can just reduce this to probably 3 decimal places, but then we can still keep it that way if we want to. So now we would have to choose the 4th option, right? So else, right? So you can make sure that if the person enters any other result, right? So this is the last option, so we can end it with else, right? And then give it its curly braces. So else what? So let's say break or stop the program. Now, but the option or the question was option 4 or any other, so we can just decide to use maybe option 4. So we could still use the else if, right, and then give it a condition, option equals 4, and then now say that break exiting app. So print f, we want to print exiting, right? exiting app, the new line. So you can do that, but then and then break. So probably we'll need to use this later, but first let's save this and try it and see whether our fourth option will run. So we compile, no error. So let's choose 4 and see exited app, and then fine. So now basically we are done with the main parts of the work, the code. We've been able to create the options, to display the option menu, and then ask for the user to input an option, take that option and lead the user to calculate the corresponding areas. But then how do we make this continue? We realize that here after every calculation we have to rerun the app again. How do we make the user continue calculating area for different things until the user specifically types the number 4 or any other number to quit, right? So we said earlier that we would have to put them into a loop, right? So first we want the menu to keep displaying, so we would have to go into a loop, right? How we do this is quite simple. So we can do that by first assigning option to be 0, giving option an initial value. Bear in mind that this is just one way of doing it, right? So it's not only one way. There's no only one way. There are several ways, but this is just one way of doing it. So you can first assign option to be 0, right? And then use a while loop and say that while we want the while option, right? Option is 0, right? It should run a particular code in its curly braces. Now I'll put one before the print and then put 1 before the last parenthesis curly braces here, so we don't forget in the end. Okay, so now we are done. Let's go back to our loop. So while option is 0, it should do these things for us. Now it should print these messages. Ideally we are to indent this so that we can actually see our loop very well. Now so for while option is 0, it should print this, right? And then now here option changes, right? But then nothing happens. It's then moves to the next line inside the loop, and then what prints or whatever prints the area, right? But then the question is, what if it's done printing this? Ideally the program would have to stop, right? So from here it has to go back and confirm and go back to this loop and see whether option is still 0. But what happens is this: once we see this, option became 1 because we chose 1 to calculate for the area of a circle. So this wouldn't go to what? 0. We see this wouldn't be 0, so the loop would stop. Let's check that by trying it ourselves. Don't just take my word for it, let's just try it. So we recompile it and we rerun it. So now let's choose option to be 1 and then our height to be 2, 2, and then we see after calculating the area it breaks. It did not continue as we wanted it to continue. So now it means that option is already 1, right? So one way of dealing with that is to do what? Change the option, right? After calculating the area of the triangle, we reassign option to be 0 here. We reassign option to be 0. So we reassign option, we say option, right, should go back to 0. So once option is 0, it will go back. So let's see whether that works or that will work as we expect it to. So we recompile and then rerun. I choose 1 I hit enter. I give it 2,2. I hit enter. The area of your triangle is that, but then still it has not run. It did not loop, so there is a problem here. Let's go back and check what the problem is. So we had an error here because I think, yes, this option is specifically for this if, right? But then the program runs all the if statements first, so the option should be outside the last if. So that's here, so we'd have to put the option here. Option equals 0 back here, so that the option always keeps being 0 after running the if statements, and then the program can continue. So let's save it and rerun it and see. So option equals 0. Let's rerun. So GCC. So no error, and then this. So let's choose option 1, and then area to be the length, the base should be 2, the height to be 2, and then we see that the area of the triangle is that, and then now it reruns. Welcome to the area app. Please choose from the options below. So even when we choose 4 to exit, it doesn't exit, it still continues. So this program will continue running until option becomes 1 or option becomes something else, right? So in order to do that, so in order to stop this program from running in your terminal, all you have to do is do Ctrl+C, right? Then this will change, this will exit. So let's clear. So in order to make it stop while we press the number 4, all we have to do is just type break here, and then save. So once we put a break inside the else if, so after typing the exiting app, let's make it break out of the loop and see what happens. So here we save it. Let's run it and see. We'll have to recompile and then rerun. So when we type 4, what happens? Exiting app, and then the program stops. So what happens? We rerun. Let's type 5 and see. Oh, 6 is not an option, so it asks you to reinsert. So once you type 4, it exits, right? So your program is well done. So now basically this is the task for today, and we are done. As I always say, you can keep modifying this and keep adding your own spice and other features. One way of editing this is changing all this to floats and then changing their respective placeholders. So that this will become %f and the others, and then maybe changing the value for pi, or modifying this instead of being an area app to something wild, something bigger, something mega. You could also decide to apply functions and then use the functions to create the area of the figures, and then call the functions inside the main function. You can do a whole lot of things, a whole lot of modifications if you want to, but for now our task for today has been achieved.